Welcome to Rebel Roundup, ladies and gentlemen, and the rest of you, in which we look back at some of the very best commentaries of the week by your favorite rebels. I'm your host, David Menzies. Well, so much for flying the friendly skies. A 76-year-old man gets on a WestJet flight, and when he falls asleep, his face mask lowers. And what did the WestJet crew do? Well, naturally, they called the cops. Adam Soos has all the unbelievable details. And speaking of calling the cops, you may recall that the Timwits at Tim Hortons did the exact same thing to Tamara Ugolini. Her crime? Simply trying to drop off a petition regarding Tim Hortons' mandate that children attending their camp must be vaccinated. Wow, throw away the key. Tamara has an update on our quest to ensure Tim Hortons receives that uber scary petition. And letters, we get your letters every minute of every day. And I'll share some of your responses about the unbelievably woke policies at Wild Waterworks in Hamilton. For example, even if you are a man with a beard, staff will still ask you if you're pregnant. Those are your rebels. Now let's round them up. This free episode of Rebel Roundup is brought to you by
my mug. I know, it's pretty cool. So is this hoodie I got on, and you could have it on too if you check out our special website at rebelnewsstore.com. That's where you can see Freedom Focus hoodies that we have for you, beanies, cell phone cases, you name it, all while supporting our journalism, where we fight to bring you the other side of the story, as opposed to, being forced by the Trudeau government to fund leftist media out of your taxes. The truth is, without you and your generosity, there is no Rebel News. So again, if you like the reports that we bring you and that we also fight for freedoms in Canada, please consider doing some shopping, picking up some swag at rebelnewsstore.com. We appreciate your support.
Adam Soos here for Rebel News with a fightthefines.com story that's really troubling, and I'll allow you to sort of fill in the details, but kind of from what we've heard, a bit of an older gentleman, Mr. Bialski, was on an airplane making every sort of effort, from what I've heard, to wear his mask, and it came down in the course of sleeping. But basically another one of these crazy stories where an older gentleman, maybe with some medical issues, just being harassed and ultimately arrested because of some mask issues on an airplane. What's the story?
We don't know much at this point, but I'll tell you what we do know is that we have a 76-year-old client, which is obviously a senior. This fellow has had a double hip replacement. He's got numerous medical conditions. One of the nicest guys that we've ever come across. On a flight, WestJet flight, just trying to finish the flight. I believe it was transatlantic as well. I'll have to check the file. We've got so many of these Fight the Fines files, and it's so bizarre to me, Adam, to still be opening Fight the Fines files after the pandemic has supposedly come to an end. This fellow was on the plane. There's allegations from WestJet that this, kind gentleman was essentially belligerent, and he was given a ticket under Canadian aviation regulations for failing to wear a mask, even though he was making best and reasonable efforts to wear a mask. He's a great guy. It's just so bizarre to see the heavy hand of the government and these draconian mandate implementations still affecting seniors and reasonable people in this province. As you know, it's a little calmer provincially, but in the aviation federal jurisdiction, we're still seeing insanity in this area, these backups at airports, and the federal government's outright refusal to dump what we see as completely unnecessary bureaucratic implementations of these mandates. This is another fight where we've got, an elderly gentleman with serious medical conditions who was unreasonably given basically a charge that we're going to meet, and we're going to treat it like the O.J. Simpson murder trial, and we will defend this man to the end. And like we do with all the Fight the Fine stuff, just another one, chalk up another one in the books. I can't believe these are still coming into the office. It's just unreal. It's absolutely unreal. We're here. We're going to take care of this guy.
Well, and there's just this, like, I get a healthy individual with, I mean, I don't necessarily agree with it. I'm not saying I get it, but is there no common sense? Is there no application of reason? We've seen this happen with old people, with medical conditions, with babies, small children. What is going through their heads?
This has been the question since the start. It doesn't take, a triple-digit IQ to realize that you can't wear a mask when you're eating or drinking, or that if you fall asleep and you lose, control of your faculties, that a mask might slip down. Another thing that we're seeing is these power trips by non-bureaucrats, but by people in positions of power. And it's weird to see stewardesses and, aviation's staff having people arrested at airports, especially 76-year-old men that have double hip replacements for failure to wear a mask, especially when they're trying to comply. That's the biggest issue. Now, again, all the facts, they're not on the table yet, and this will have to go through due process, but frankly, we're going to put the prosecution to the task, as we do in each and every one of these cases, to make sure that they prove their case beyond all reasonable doubt. And we'll do that here.
Well, folks, just when you thought COVID craziness couldn't possibly get any more insane, well, yet another ludicrous benchmark is achieved. Just imagine the COVID Karens running WestJet. They thought it was completely appropriate to call the police on a 76-year-old man whose mask slipped down while he slept. And likewise, the cops thought this man, well, yes, he needed to be arrested too, a threat to society. So much for flying the friendly skies. Indeed, flying these days resembles the title of one of my favorite Twilight Zone episodes, and that would be Nightmare at 20,000 feet.
Hurry! He's out there! Hurry!
And joining me now for more on this bizarre story is our Calgary-based reporter, Adam Soos. How you doing there, Adam?
Oh, I'm doing wonderful. Thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Always a pleasure. Adam, when you first heard about this story, did you react as I did? Namely, I thought it was a hoax. I really did. But this is as real as it gets. How do you make sense of this utter nonsense?
Yeah, I don't think you can. It is very much the stuff of nonce, like the stories. And I'm going to be cautious here because this is a legal proceeding. For folks who don't know, it's actually Chad Williamson of Williamson Law, through the efforts and through very much your support at fightthefines.com, who's advocating for this client. So I don't want to say anything that might affect that case in any way, but I can relay what I know. And I first started hearing reports about a sort of a senior citizen being hauled off a plane after landing and arrested because his mask slid down, and that seems not possible. That seems like one of the emails you get, and you do a little bit of fishing around, and it turns out this, that, and the other thing. When I spoke with Chad Williamson, he said they are trying to get to the bottom of some of the issues and some conversations. So everything I'm saying now is not legal, but it's from what people have relayed to me. But effectively, there was one or two times where the 76-year-old man who was flying transatlantic. An older gentleman enduring a very long flight. He has a few medical issues, not all of which I know, but I know he's had a double hip replacement. I'm going to be speaking with him soon. He's holding off for a little bit now, kind of getting his affairs in order. But a 76-year-old man with a number of health issues, confronted a few times for leaving his mask down too long, I gather, between bites or between sips, just an absolute COVID Karen flight attendant or flight helper, or whatever the heck you're supposed to call him these days, pestering this poor 76-year-old man. And then, of all things, probably exhausted from the ongoing barrage of harassment, he falls asleep. And did he fall asleep with his mask off? No. He was making every reasonable effort to comply with these stupid rules, while mainstream media and the Pope seemingly are exempt. And his mask didn't even fall off, but it slid down while he slept subconsciously. Well, that was the last straw for these I hate to use Pastor Arthur Pawlowski terms, but I mean, there's some soup Nazi sort of action going on there for sure. No flight for you.
No soup for you. Come back 1 year.
Heaven forbid a senior citizen's mask would slide down ever so slightly as they slept. Most people would think, oh, that's endearing. That's cute. Look at the grandpa. Nope. And from what we hear, Chad Williamson says this guy's just the absolute nicest guy you'll ever meet. It's sickening.
Adam, there is plenty of blame to go around here, I think. First of all, whichever flight attendant identified this potential typhoid Mary threat, because God forbid his mask was over his nose. The fact that there was consensus with the flight crew, how are we going to handle this? Well, we're going to call the cops and get them arrested on touchdown. To me, that is bizarre, this kind of groupthink that thought this was a 911 call. Secondly, the cops, instead of saying, are you kidding? We've got carjackings, we've got shootings, we've got arson. We don't have time for this nonsense. Nope. Calling all cars, get to the Calgary airport. And the thing is, Adam, if this really was a threat to society, couldn't it be handled differently? For example, and this would be bad because I'm assuming he was deep asleep, but wake him up and say, I'm so sorry, sir, but your mask came down. I'm obliged to tell you to put it back up. Or the flight attendant with a gloved hand could have raised the mask back up, problem solved. But they went with the nuclear option. And what is motivating this, Adam? I mean, I think what we've seen the last 2.5 years is the very worst of people. I call them the COVID Karens, the people that were maybe the hall monitors, the people who were bullies. And this pandemic has enabled them to basically become vigilantes and rat out people. What's your take?
Yeah, 100%. It has brought out the absolute worst of the very worst people. Now, to avoid being entirely negative, what we've seen with whether it's some of these freedom protests, the freedom movements, whatever it may be, that is the very best of people. They're looking out for each other. It's entirely peaceful. They're taking care of each other. These people, and it starts from the head down, from Justin Trudeau and even the bosses at WestJet firing all their employees, even with stellar records, even some who had medically adverse reactions. This is a top-down problem, and they are rewarding narcs. They're rewarding people who don't handle things. And it isn't just 76-year-old men. We also saw parents trying to mask up their 2-year-old child, and they were kicked off planes. Like, have an ounce of common sense. I don't care what the rules are. Be a decent human being and say, yeah, mask looks good to me. I'm just going to move on. Because all this harassment, all these arrests, there's nothing scientific about it. This is vindictive, it's vengeful, and it's spurred on by this rhetoric that anyone who has any apprehension towards a mask is a villain. I think we talked about this a little bit on stream the other day, but like, I've got a little bit of asthma, and wearing a mask on a flight is brutal. Yeah. I can't imagine someone with a serious respiratory issue getting through a long flight without taking a few breaks, without cheating a little bit with their masks. It's exhausting. I'm always coughing for a day after a flight from wearing the mask.
No, it is bizarre to me. I still see young, healthy people outside jogging, riding a bicycle, and they're masked up. And it is baffling. But you said it's not scientific, and I agree with you, Adam. As you mentioned, it's a long-haul flight. So presumably at one point, almost everybody on that plane took their masks down to have a meal, to drink liquids.
Yeah.
How do you sell that? I mean, is it that the coronavirus respects people who are hungry and thirsty and will lay off infecting them? But, oh my goodness, if you are just sitting there reading a book or you're sleeping, I mean, is this virus that super intelligent? Because if it is, Adam, I think we're facing our extinction event.
Yeah, we should just phone it in. There's no point fighting back anymore. It's so... It is, I know, I said it's anti-scientific, but it is almost religious. Some of these people now, and it isn't just the extremists, it's not just the Dr. Vipons or whoever out there who are constantly fear-mongering. Like, I have friends who would consider themselves apolitical centrist moderates. They literally still are preaching, and this is the fault of mainstream media, they're preaching the horrific Spanish flu level talk and early fears surrounding COVID-19 that were debunked like 3 months into it. Even when Dr. Dina Hinshaw or Bonnie Henry or any other mainstream Tamara, whoever it may be, they say, Dr. Tam, they say, well, this isn't the situation anymore. We're moving to this. They don't adopt the new best information, even when it's from health officials. They're still echoing those religious talking points about how, well, COVID's going to kill us all. And the fact I wear a mask, that makes me one of the sort of elect. I think that's the crux of this.
You know what? One last question on this, Adam, because we're running out of time. I think you said something very profound there, that it's almost religious. And I tend to agree with you. When I see somebody at this day and age still masking up, I look upon them much like you'd see a Muslim lady wearing a hijab, a Christian wearing a cross, a Sikh gentleman wearing a turban. Basically, you're saying, I'm on Team Islam, I'm on Team Christianity, I'm on Team Sikhism. Except what this is, it's a symbol, I think, and I see it mostly with young people, the people that in yesterdecade used to revolt on campus against the man. Basically, they're sending a message. I'm pro-big government. I'm pro-big lockdowns. I'm pro-clamping down on our rights because the government is saying this is the best thing to do. The medical necromancers, as our good friend Sheila likes to call them, is saying this is the way to go. What is your take? Am I reading this right? Because I think if you're young and healthy and wearing one of these bloody face diapers at this stage, it's not about the virus anymore. Not whatsoever.
And punk is dead, man. This is a bit of an aside, but the people who were the anti-government, anti-big pharma, freedom fighter, punk rock, alt, whatever it may be, folks, they're the ones walking around sticking up for big pharma, even when it doesn't make any sense, sticking up for big government, calling anyone who resists government fascists. They have absolutely and completely lost the plot, lost their roots. Don't get me wrong, there are people within those movements who have sort of moved over to the side of freedom, which is what that was all about. But yeah, we've gone down a troubling road, and it's sad to see how many people who were once the very people to question this sort of thing, to take a stand, to be the voices opposing government overreach, while they're buying in. There's the old SLC punk to quote it.
I didn't sell out, son. I bought in. Keep that in mind.
Well, these guys bought in hard. I doubt many of them are investing in Pfizer, but the folks who are certainly celebrating that. Very sad to see. And how many extreme examples are there? Like a 76-year-old man being arrested, like a 2-year-old child being hauled off a plane and their family. Like, how many cartoon level caricaturistic examples do there have to be to show people how wrong this is? And yet people, they still don't get it. But I guess that's what you get when they're living on their religious convictions.
Absolutely. Adam, I referenced the Twilight Zone at the beginning of this segment. I sometimes truly feel we're living through a real-life Twilight Zone episode. It is so bizarre. It's so inexplicable, so nonsensical, and we still see stories like this happening. Incredible. I'm really looking forward to your interview with the 76-year-old gentleman. That will be great. Thank you so much, and you have a great weekend, Adam.
You too. Thanks again for having me.
You got it. And that was Adam Soos in Calgary. Keep it here, folks. More of Rebel Roundup to come right after this. This free episode of Rebel Roundup is brought to you by...
Well, the remains of 215 children have been found in a mass grave in Canada.
Many of you know that just over a year ago, the discovery of the remains of 215 children was found at the Kamloops Indian Residential School at the Tecumseh First Nation. But what if I were to show you that what I just said wasn't true, and that in fact, a year later, not a single body has been found?
This mass grave is a painful reminder of the genocide.
Canada's leaders aren't condemning the burning of churches. No, they're endorsing the burning of churches.
A juvenile rib bone that surfaced in the same area.
Looks like the chief.
It is.
Could be you.
For Rebel News, I'm Tamara Ugolini out front of this post office in Port Hope, Ontario, to finally submit this Tim Hortons petition that I've been holding on to for several weeks now. If you're not familiar, we began this campaign at letkidscamp.com. You can sign this petition in opposition of an aggressive and unscientific policy that the managerial staff at the Tim Hortons Foundation camps have put in place for all of their campers aged 12 and up. They've mandated that they be double vaccinated. Now, Tim's camp is, like I said, currently enforcing the double vaccination on all of their campers and staff. And when I first tried to drop this petition off nearly a month ago at the Tim's Camp home office in St. George, Ontario, which was approximately a 5-hour round trip, the fearless leaders there actually called the police on me. Let's do a quick recap of how that went. Check it out. We are unable to, unfortunately, get any assistance from anyone, so we've called the number.
Is it closed?
Well, the sign would say so, but we spoke to someone just as we arrived in who was either just trying to leave or coming, and yeah, I don't know either. We drove all this way to submit this petition on behalf of some concerned Canadians, obviously 27,000 of them.
Right. Where's all the way from?
Toronto.
Toronto?
Yeah. So I guess we'll try again another time.
Yeah.
Now, it was a little bit confusing back then in person trying to drop off this petition because on the phone, the voice message said that the camp was open, but the locked gates said that the camp was closed. Now, since that time, this petition has garnered an additional 10,000 signatures. When I first tried to drop it off, it was at just shy of 27,000 signatures, and now we have just over 35,000. The printed copy that I have here today that I'm going to be sending registered mail has almost 33,000 signatures, so obviously this petition continues to grow and receive support. Now, I had heard that Human Resources Manager April Brown may have had a say or something to do with this aggressive policy, but unfortunately she has not responded to my repeated requests via email and voice messaging. It's funny to note here that after I attempted to drop this petition off in person, we had left voicemails for April Brown directly, and after that time, she seemed to remove her LinkedIn profile, and the phone settings of the home office voicemail has been changed now, so you can no longer reach April Brown directly. So I'm here now. We're going to send this, like I said, registered mail to April Brown. So let's see, stay tuned as we try to submit this. Okay, so just under 400 pages, 35,000 plus signatures have been submitted to April Brown. We weren't able to do registered mail. However, we're able to send it express post and tracked with a signature required. So perhaps we'll post the tracking number for all of our viewers to be able to follow along and see exactly when this hefty petition is submitted to April Brown at the Tim Hortons Foundation camp. And we will keep the petition active. So again, feel free to head on over if you haven't already and sign the petition. Find out more, follow our reports at letkidscamp.com.
Geez, talk about a bunch of timwits. First, Tim Hortons decides to embrace vaccine apartheid for children going to their summer camp. Then they call the police on Tamara Ugolini when she shows up to merely drop off a petition that so many of you signed. And now this April Brown, the Human Resources Senior Manager of Camp Operations, she's apparently gone into hiding, not wanting to answer any impolite questions about Tim Hortons aggressively and unscientifically and perhaps even harmfully enacting this policy. What a disgrace. Full disclosure, I love Tim Hortons coffee, but their vaccination policy and the way in which this company handles media relations is about as appetizing as a week-old donut. And joining me now for more on this story is Tamara Ugolini herself. Hey, how you doing there, Tamara?
Oh, I'm well. Thanks, David, over here not complying. And what about you?
Not complying either. I wish I could rock that T-shirt as well as you do, my friend. But Tamara, the thing we know from 2+ years of COVID-19 hell is that young, healthy people are the least likely to get the virus. So why is Tim Hortons embracing this discriminatory policy in the first place?
That's one of my very direct and you would think easy to answer questions based on the fact that they've imposed this policy indiscriminately on all youth and staff aged 12 and up. However, Tim Hortons, the fearless leaders and the managerial staff that's imposed this mandate, unfortunately, never respond to my request for clarification and or comment with a question that specific pointed right to them. So I still have no idea what the merit or the justification for this heavy-handed policy was.
You know, Tamara, they really have a weird corporate communications department there. Some 15 years ago, I stumbled on the fact, I was one of the first reporters to find out that Tim Hortons was no longer baking their donuts from scratch. They were getting these frozen pucks, as they call them, and they would reheat them in the ovens. That's what always fresh means to them now. And when I reached out to the public relations lady at Tim Hortons, she said, we haven't released that information. And I said, yeah, but it's reality. I interviewed a staff member at the restaurant, and she actually said to me, unless it comes from my lips, it didn't happen. And I thought, this is like somebody trying to deny gravity. But getting back to the issue at hand, if I'm the parent of a child going to camp and I'm being, forced to have that child vaccinated, I'm sorry, Tamara, I'm not willing to undertake that risk. This is an experimental vaccine. It was very much rushed. We see the myocarditis issues that are emerging, which so many people are not talking about. So again, while summer camp is great, it's not worth the risk of getting that jab. I'm sorry.
No, I agree. And the mother who actually alerted me to this policy is in alignment with what you just stated as well. And the myocarditis rate continues to increase as per the government's own reporting data. Kelly Brown and I have discussed this in length on the Rebel platform. And post second dose, the myocarditis rate for young males is 1 in 35 or 1 in 3,800. I mean, it's an astronomical number, so much so that our chief medical officer of health here in Ontario has finally acknowledged that that risk does exist. And yet, regardless, the Tim's camp has continued with this policy. They've de-rostered the child, the youth of the mother who originally alerted me to this policy. And this kid they would be in their 5th year, so the final year of the camp. And then, of course, they can seek scholarship from there. And so he has now been prevented all of those opportunities in his final year attending the camp and to advance into a staff position and, of course, achieve or have a scholarship granted to him. So it is just so unwarranted what they're doing and in my opinion, unethical and not justified.
And in addition to that, Tamara, it just seems to be so petty and vindictive and mean-spirited. And I want to get your take. I mean, I couldn't believe my eyes on your original video when you went out to the camp with our camera woman, Isabel, and maybe the two of you combined weigh 170 pounds. And somehow you're deemed to be a threat, like it's an active shooter coming up onto the property. They phoned the police. Why did they phone the police?
Oh, it was so funny when the police cruiser strolled up. I just sighed, and I think you hear it in my report. I'm like, oh, here we go, right? And as soon as the police officer got out of the vehicle, you could tell his disposition. He just thought it was ridiculous. He saw Isabel and I there, and it's like we're these tiny women who are, just peeking around, doing a report. She was actually filming my wrap up of what happened at the Tim's camp at the time that he pulled up. And lo and behold, I wish I had have noticed at the time that it was Brent Gretzky, so Wayne Gretzky's brother. And I thought, in the moment, I'm like, this guy looks so familiar. And it turns out that, yes, because he's Brent Gretzky, he looks very much like Walt Gretzky, their father.
Yes.
And he was so friendly and cordial about the whole thing. Obviously, you could tell that he thought it was absolutely ridiculous and asinine that they even called the police on this. We never attempted to go onto the property. There was no trespassing. And the fact that they wouldn't receive, a stack of papers and a petition just goes to show you what kind of HR and media department they're running at the Tim's camp, as evidenced also by your experience 15 years ago, right?
Yeah, it's disgraceful, but I can't help but notice the irony here is Canada's largest food service chain named after a former NHL great. And it's like when they call the cops, can we have somebody attached to hockey royalty to come and arrest Tamara Ugolini?
That's why I wish I had have noticed that it was Brent, because I would have loved to have gotten his opinion on how he thinks Tim Horton would have responded to this kind of aggressive policy at the hands of the managerial staff and whatever they align with, right? Because we know it's not based in science or evidence. At this point, the vaccines don't prevent transmission or infection. So what is the point?
Well, Tim Horton was one of the strongest men to ever play hockey in NHL history, and I'm sure he's rolling in his grave right now that the restaurant chain that bears his name is bullying children and their parents who don't want to get vaccinated. Last question, Tamara, where does it go from here? You've sent out the petition and at a considerable cost, so if anyone out there wants to chip in to help Tamara's campaign, that would be much appreciated. But I don't imagine, given the arrogance that is inherent to the Tim Hortons company, that they're going to respond. So where indeed do we go from here regarding a final epilogue to this story?
Well, as you said, David, you can head on over to letkidscamp.com. At that website, you can find all my previous reports on the subject. There are several, and you can find the petition itself. And of course, you can donate there to help offset the costs of our travel and sending the petition and printing off all these pages. David, I'm not entirely sure, because I was quite shocked, to be honest, that the petition garnered an additional 10,000 signatures in, a few weeks span from when we originally tried to drop the petition off to when I mailed it out formally. So I think we're over or almost close to 36,000 signatures now, and that continues to grow. So I'm happy to just leave that and keep my ear to the ground on what's happening here. My source on this policy continues to provide me with updates. So I'm staying in the loop to see if and when they backpedal or renege on the policy. And of course, if they don't, then that's a report in itself as well. So in the meantime, I would just urge people to continue to sign and share that petition, and we'll see how much support it continues to grow. And maybe there's another physical drop-off attempt in the future. I'm keeping an open mind on this one.
Yeah, and the other thing too, Tamara, is the boycott element hurt Tim Hortons, with their bottom line. And I got an actual example of that. Last Sunday, I was driving along with Lady Menzoid on Yonge Street. She was craving a coffee. There was a Tim Hortons. I said, here? And she says, absolutely not. Based on your reports, she's done with Tim Hortons. She was a big Tim Hortons fan. So we kept going to McDonald's, and hopefully that company won't commit some kind of COVID-19 infraction.
Good for her.
Yeah.
What a principled,
it's a true story.
Moral woman. And that's great.
My final question, I know I said that was the last question, but do you have any indication from this company, Tamara, when, if ever, this policy is going to end? Or is this the new normal for Tim Hortons? Like if we're talking 2032, a decade in the future, you still have to be triple, quadruple, whatever the rule is, vaxxed in order to be a child going to this summer camp?
Based on their radio silence to any and all of my questions, and also the communication that I've been forwarded again from my source with Tim Hortons and some of their managerial staff directly, it sounds like they're really clinging to this mandate. And if we can fast track 10 years, I don't know, I guess you would need like 20 or 30 boosters by that time. I mean, who will be left standing to even go to Tim's camp at that point? And who knows what the health outcomes will be of the children who have been at their camp this summer, right? We've seen unprecedented afflictions in athletic sports, young males dropping on the field. So when these youth attempt to engage in any sort of physical activity, it makes me really nervous and concerned what the outcome will be there. So I have no idea what Tim's plan is, if they even have one, or they're just flying by the seat of their pants and obviously unable to attest to or attain any sort of evidence to back up this policy that, oddly enough, wasn't even published publicly online. I had to receive this tip again from a source and a concerned parent whose child has been prevented their camp experience this year.
Isn't that interesting? Well, Tamara, thanks for tuning in. I was already upset with this company for dropping the blueberry fritter many years ago, but this is the final straw. That's it. It's over to McDonald's for their coffee instead. Tamara, you have a wonderful weekend, and thanks for keeping on top of this story with your due diligence.
And thanks for having me on the show, David. All the best.
You got it. And that was Tamara Ugolini, somewhere near Cobourg, Ontario. Keep it here, folks. More of Rebel Roundup to come right after this. This free episode of Rebel Roundup is brought to you by...
Canadians have stepped up to do the right thing to protect the freedoms and the rights of Canadians to get back to the things we love to do.
It's just so tough to watch. There's no reason for that. They were literally running the horses through the crowd. I understand it's like a tactic that they use to try and split up the crowd.
Trudeau, you're messing with the wrong people. The 10% is after you if you think it's only 10%.
This is something I've certainly never seen before.
And federal authorities and politicians, we hear you, but we want to be heard as well.
Just the issue of bringing up drugs and pregnancy with an 11-year-old is kind of where I had issue as a parent.
No. Do you know Alexandra Campbell? She's the corporate communications person. Why does she not return calls?
Okay, sir, I've asked you multiple times to leave the property. They want you to leave. You're on private
Who's
property.
they?
The people that are here.
Who are the people? What are their titles?
Any of that information. No, I'm not entitled to.
And you won't answer these questions if bearded men are being asked if they're pregnant on a water slide.
Again, I do not work for TSSA.
Who are you then?
I know. I'm a private investigator who's been hired by this company.
Oh, you're a PI.
So I need you to leave the property, sir.
Few things are more fun than going to a water park on a hot, humid summer day, be it zipping down a multi-story water slide or just floating along in the lazy river. A visit to a water park is a great way to beat the summer heat and have a few laughs. But Dwayne of Oakville, Ontario, he's not amused by the way in which Wild Water World in Hamilton operates. Indeed, when Dwayne takes his 11-year-old daughter to the park, staffers are uber diligent about deriving personal information from Dwayne and his daughter, information that is equal parts inexplicable and downright ridiculous. And joining me now to fill us in on the nitty-gritty details, it's Dwayne. Hey, how you doing there, Dwayne?
Hey, thanks, David. I appreciate you covering this.
Well, I appreciate your time, sir. Now, as I mentioned, a water park should be a fun place to visit, but when we spoke off camera, I couldn't believe the crazy questions staffers at Wild Water World were asking you and your daughter. Please elaborate.
Yeah, so we arrived, beautiful day. Seemed like a nice park and stuff, but we decided to check out the water slides. So there's basically two entrances to two separate water slides on both sides of the main pools. Every time up, they would ask us, first they would turn to my daughter and ask her if she was pregnant and if she was on drugs. And then they would weigh her to make sure that she wasn't over 300 pounds. And then they would look at me and ask me if I was pregnant and on drugs, and then weigh me. So it was, a bit strange that we had to do this, but then every single time up the water slide, they would repeat the same questions.
Well, okay. There's a lot to unpack there. By the way, I think I referred to it as Wild Water World. Water World was that Kevin Costner disaster movie from the 90s. It's Wild Waterworks. This park sounds like a disaster, too, in terms of its questioning. Dwayne, first things first, you are a 47-year-old man with a beard, and they're asking you, are you pregnant? this is baffling to me. I can't even make sense of it.
Yeah, it seems like logic and reason's being replaced by something else. I don't want to assume anything, right? But to have most of the people that work at the park are young and they're just doing their jobs, around 16 or whatnot. But they're still well above my daughter's age, and they seem to be asking questions again and again. We knew them by the time, we went up 3 times just, through conversation. But it's just the park's policy.
But I'm just trying to figure out what the ostensible policy reason is behind the policy. You are clearly male. You've got a beard, for goodness sakes. Is there some suspicion you might have had a uterus implanted in you and you might have become pregnant somehow? It is baffling. And your daughter, I believe she's 11 years old, around 60 pounds or so, and clearly, a child. She's asked, A, if she's pregnant, and B, if she's taking illicit drugs. Why would they ask that?
I can't guess, but the repetition that they asked, so we must have went up the water slides about 12 times. So just the issue of bringing up drugs and pregnancy with 11-year-old is kind of where I had issue as a parent.
Wow. How woke can you go? Asking bearded males if they are pregnant, asking people under 100 pounds if they weigh more than 400 pounds and if they're doing illegal drugs. I thought going to a water park was supposed to be all about having a good time, not enduring a Q&A session driven by wokeness and political correctness and utter stupidity. Meanwhile, the manager of the park, Sarah Kinnear, she/her, claims the park has to ask these queries. She/her said that Wild Waterworks is spied on by employees with the Technical Standards and Safety Authority. Now, these are the folks who inspect everything in the province, from nuclear power plants to roller coasters. But nobody at the TSSA would return our calls and emails to confirm or deny this. And when we paid them a house call to TSSA's Toronto head office, they actually sicked security on us. What the hell is going on here? In any event, you had plenty to say about the utter weirdness taking place at Wild Waterworks in Hamilton, Ontario. Reneni3 writes, why not leave the minute they start asking these questions? When people agree to this stupidity, it'll only get worse. Boycott them. Well, Reneni, we received tons of responses, just like yours, from viewers saying they will indeed boycott this park. And boycotts can work. Look what's happening at Disney World right now. Attendance is down at this theme park thanks to goofy policies such as banning the words ladies and gentlemen and boys and girls, so as, not to offend the radical transgender lunatic fringe. Wow, Uncle Walt must be turning in his grave right now. Not a Russian bot writes, he should tell the waterslide people he is pregnant and he is trying to abort his baby by taking the slide. That should work because liberals are in favor of abortion. Wow, what a brilliant, albeit dark idea. And really, what would they say upon hearing that statement? Fascinating. Miss Cool writes, what happens if they, meaning men, answer yes and keep a straight face? Maybe I need to visit this watery insane asylum myself just to find out what the heck goes on in these conversations. Then maybe I'll pretend I'm about to give birth. Hey, two can play at this nut bar game. Tanya writes, appropriate response to that pregnancy question would be stating that one self-identifies as a female reptile incubating 100 or so coral snakes. Wow. I understand coral snakes are very venomous. I wonder if manager Sarah Kinnear, she/her, would then declare the park an unsafe space and then shut it down completely. Yikes. And Carrot Pick writes, if you're insulted by someone asking your weight, maybe it's time to lose weight. Carrot Pig, I think you have completely lost the point here. When a little girl who is about 60 pounds, is asked if she is over 400 pounds, that's just plain crazy. It would be like a liquor store employee asking a senior citizen for ID. Completely unnecessary unless the goal is to make the lineups get even further and further long due to insane questioning of patrons who just want to have fun. Well, that wraps up another edition of Rebel Roundup. Thanks so much for joining us. See you next week. And hey, folks, never forget, without risk, there can be no glory. Good night.